So today's webinar is called The Road to Reliable Energy, Solar Energy, Battery Storage, and Electric Vehicles. My name is Heather McKenzie, and I am the Executive Director at Solar Alberta. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that I am presenting to you today from Amiskwaciwaskahigan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papaches, Nehewak or Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We are delighted to have so many people register for this event, and please note that we will be recording this webinar for future distribution. Today, we'll be hearing from 3 informative speakers about the relationship between solar energy, energy storage, and electric vehicles, and how this alliance can progress Albertans on the road to a sustainable and just energy transition. Following the presentation, there will be a Q&A period in which you can all participate. The formal Q&A will run until about 1/4 past the hour, and then we'll be inviting you to join us for an additional 15 minutes in a more relaxed Zoom meeting Q&A at the end. The link for the extended Q&A will be posted in the chat at the end of the formal Q&A, and I will draw your attention to it at that time. Please make sure to click on the link before leaving the webinar. But don't worry, we won't leave the webinar until we know that you've gotten through. The entire session will wrap up in an hour and a half. In an effort to increase accessibility to the content we are offering, we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. During our formal Q&A period, we will be using Zoom Q&A for the questions rather than the chat box. So please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Also, please click on the little thumbs up symbol to upvote questions that you like. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. So I'll ask that Megan or Mackenzie, if you could please pop the poll up. And if the audience could please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen now, we would appreciate it. Great. And while some are still completing the poll, I just want to encourage you all to take a minute, pop your name, land acknowledgement, any contact info that you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that other folks can look you up on LinkedIn or email you, and some relationships can begin to be formed. All right, I see lots of responses coming in. When we hit 80%, I think we can end the poll. Oh, we're so close. There we are. Okay, let's end that poll. And I think you can all see it now. So the majority of you are solar or storage or EV curious, which means lots of folks from the general public here today, which was, of course, our intent for this session. Also, pleased to welcome many industry professionals. So that's great to see that you're with us as well. Please do take a minute to introduce yourselves in the chat, and some students here too. Great. Thanks for helping us understand. Oh, I see I wasn't sharing it. My apologies. Now I'll say stop sharing. Now you can all see. Okay. Close that out. And carry on. Just a little bit of info about Solar Alberta. Okay, so Solar Alberta is now in its 31st year of operation. We are a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 320 individuals and businesses. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website, if you're curious about who could do an install for you. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their customers and clients. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on this slide. In addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs, such as this solar seminar series on a number of Thursdays over the lunch hour. We have another one coming up at the end of September that you're welcome to join us for. We also have some multilingual Solar 101 workshops available on our website. We've got Mandarin and Hindi so far, so check those out if you are in those language categories. We also host an annual online conference and trade show called the Solar Show, and a couple of in-person networking and trade show events per year. Really proud to share that in 2022, our Solar Show reached over 600 people. Recordings of that show and the one the year before can be found at solaralberta.ca or on our YouTube channel. And just save the dates, February 6th to 10th for our 2023 Solar Show. And for those of you who are considering entering the solar sector, or you're looking to do some professional development in the sector this fall and winter, we're hosting a number of online courses. You can see the list here, but also at solaralberta.ca, you can have a browse through all the different options. This fall, the economics of grid-tied solar PV will be our first course starting in October. If you're unable to attend any of the live classes in the fall or winter, you can alternatively purchase pre-recorded courses and workshops on our website. An idea that was actually inspired by our sponsor today and his colleagues. All right, if you're not already, I would like to encourage you to join Solar Alberta as a member. We're constantly evolving member service offerings, some of which you can see listed on the screen. Individual membership is only $35 and can be purchased at solaralberta.ca. And if you're looking for additional ways to support our work, please consider volunteering or donating. Many of you in attendance have already generously donated when registering for this event. Just want to extend our thanks for that. And please be aware that volunteers are eligible for free membership with Solar Alberta after committing 15 hours, and they can also get $100 off of a course each year. So of course, volunteer opportunities consist of helping with communications, public education, advocacy, and more. And I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage those of you who live or work in the Edmonton area to join the Smart, Sustainable, Resilient Infrastructure Association, SSRIA, and us on October 13th for the Sustainable Building Network and Trade Show we're hosting at NATE. It's an in-person event, which is rare. We haven't had those in a few years, so this will be our second in-person event. So you can mix and mingle with folks in the solar and sustainable building industries. This event is free to attend. However, we are selling trade show booths for $200. So if you wanted to buy a trade show booth, you're welcome to do so. And we are still looking for a sponsor for this event. So you're welcome to reach out to us about that as well at partners@solaralberta.ca. Both trade show booths and sponsorships are available for a 10% discount for members. Stay tuned to our social media and newsletter to learn more about when all of our upcoming events will be. And we're hoping to be in person in Southern Alberta again in 2023, as we were at SAIT in the spring of this year. Now, I just want to take this opportunity to give a big shout out to Skyfire Energy for sponsoring today's seminar. We're really happy to have them as a sponsor and longtime member, and I know many of their staff and folks who have used their services are probably joining us today. So really interested in developing many partnerships for our events. So if you or your company you work for would like to help us educate the public about solar-related technologies or opportunities, as Skyfire is doing today, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, now what you're all here for, I'm going to introduce our wonderful speakers today. Today, you're going to hear from our partner and co-host, Leon Benson-King with Energy Storage Canada. Leon is a communications and engagement specialist with more than a decade of experience in strategic development and project management in the not-for-profit sector. She transitioned to the energy sector nearly 4 years ago, beginning with the Energy Council of Canada, a national resource neutral not-for-profit, and joined Energy Storage Canada in the summer of 2021. She is passionate about supporting the development of Canada's energy industry as the country transitions to net zero. Leon holds a Master of Arts from Carleton University and speaks English, Spanish, and French. So welcome, Leon. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation in a few minutes. And our second presenter today is actually going to be David Kelly of Skyfire Energy. David is a solar veteran with 20 years in the solar business. David is a professional engineer and leads a diverse team at Skyfire Energy, the largest pure play solar EPC in Western Canada. David has served on the boards of CanSIA and Solar Alberta and continues to participate in the industry associations. Skyfire services the West and North from their offices in Calgary, Edmonton, and West Kelowna. David and his family live in Calgary and their home is partially solar powered. Oh yes, so welcome, David. Really glad you could be with us today. Again, we always enjoy hearing from you. All right, and our third presenter today, Danielle, was not able to join us, but fortunately, he has been replaced by Louise Levesque, who is the Director of Policy at Electric Mobility Canada. So Louise is not going to be presenting to us today due to her stepping in at the last minute. However, she's kindly joining us for the Q&A, and so you'll have lots of opportunity to ask questions of her about electric vehicles. Louise has vast experience as a communications, marketing, and public relations consultant, specializing in the commercial, cooperative, and environmental sectors. At Electric Mobility Canada, she focuses on a number of electric mobility issues by conducting research and analysis and leading committees such as the organization's Government Relations Committee and the Battery Working Group. So no stranger to the Canadian electric vehicle space, Louise has been working exclusively on communications mandates for companies and organizations centered on EVs and charging since 2015. She's planned and executed electric vehicle test drive events, as well as educational and awareness campaigns, and contributed to the development of communications plans, stakeholder relations, strategies, and event logistics. So welcome to all three of our presenters today. Really looking forward to chatting with you all during the Q&A period. And now I'm going to turn the mic and the screen over to Leon to begin the presentations. All right, Leon, you're welcome to turn your camera on and your mic on, and I see your screen share coming through beautifully.
All right. Are you able to hear me, Heather?
You bet, and you're even in sync with your audio, so that's perfect. We've worked out all the kinks.
Can't ask for better than that. So for today, I am going to be sharing with you all a little bit of information about the organization that I work for, which is Energy Storage Canada. I'll also be giving you a bit of a brief overview in terms of what the landscape of energy storage in Canada is looking like right now, and then kind of bring it back down to the more specific Alberta context before passing things over to my fellow panelists. So to start with, oh, there we go. Energy Storage Canada is the voice of energy storage in Canada. We represent the industry at all levels, which includes grid level, distribution level, and behind the meter. We're technology agnostic, which means that we're interested in anything and everything that has to do with energy storage, regardless of what the source of energy is, what the form of the storage is, or what the duration of the energy storage is. So our mandate is to work with decision makers in Canada to help develop Canada's energy storage market and create a more reliable, flexible, sustainable, and affordable energy grid. We do this by working with policymakers and regulators to make sure that regulatory policies help enable energy storage, both at the provincial and the federal level. And we provide a lot of support to decision makers across the country to ensure that we're able to do that. Some of the things that we do through Energy Storage Canada are that we host the only national energy storage only conference in Canada, which is coming up this year in October. We provide opportunities for leadership and access to experts and government representatives through our membership and through some of our own webinars and events. And we host and facilitate forums and conversations related to current policy and regulatory issues across the country about energy storage. So currently we have over 90 members in our membership. They range from generators to providers to utilities to professional services organizations, as well as a number of NGOs and not-for-profit organizations that are stakeholders in Canada's energy sector. Our mission as an organization is to lead the growth and market development of the energy storage sector in Canada as part of the ongoing energy transition. And our vision for energy storage in Canada is to see it as a key element of an affordable, sustainable, and resilient electricity grid with diversified energy storage technologies and applications deployed across all provinces and territories. So the first very essential and basic starting point for energy storage is determining what energy storage is. Energy storage is any technology or process that captures energy when it's produced and stores it for later use, eventually discharging it. There's a lot of different forms of energy storage, most of which are listed here as kind of a summary to get you started. The four primary types of energy storage are chemical, which includes batteries or fuel cells or power to gas, electrical, which is your capacitors and superconductors, thermal, which includes molten salt and ice storage, and then mechanical like pumped storage and compressed air or flywheel mechanical storage. So these are some of our members' projects and some non-member projects actually as well, because already, even though energy storage is typically considered a fairly new technology, there are lots of different energy storage projects across Canada. As you can see, there's a bit of a variety here in the ones that we've selected to share with you. We've got HydroStore and EnerStore, which tend to focus on mechanical storage. We've got a zinc battery, which most folks are fairly familiar with the lithium-ion batteries, but there are other types of battery sources as well. One of our members, eZinc, has been working hard to get zinc batteries onto Canada's grid. We've got long duration energy solutions through the molten salt down in the left-hand corner, as well as some of the flywheel projects and power to gas facilities. So the value proposition of energy storage is that energy is a mix of different supplies to create electricity. The demand patterns are changing, and the grid operators are going to need different resources and additional resources as the grid changes and evolves as Canada transitions to net zero to make sure that we maintain safe, reliable, and affordable energy. And at Energy Storage Canada, we believe that energy storage resources offer a lot of that versatility and flexibility that's going to be required in our grid going forward. Energy storage resources can increase how easily and effectively we use our existing assets and can also help to supplement a lot of the newer intermittent energy assets like solar and wind that we're seeing coming onto the grid. Energy storage can also help support net zero and decarbonization efforts by capturing some of those renewable intermittent resources like solar and wind and saving them up for later so we're less reliant on some of the less net zero friendly options. So energy storage is well suited to meet a range of customer and system needs. There's front of the meter standalone systems that are directly connected to the grid or the transmission system. We have behind the meter storage, which are customer sited energy storage systems. These either provide services directly to customers or non-exporting or exporting with the ability to provide grid services. And then there are hybrid pairings with distributed and transmission generation. A couple of years ago, we were able to do a study that looked at the ways that all of these different types of storage can help to build and support Canada's grid. The study was called Unlocking the Potential of Energy Storage in Ontario. So we were looking at it just from a provincial level. It was released in July 2020. And the analysis concluded that by enabling energy storage in the province and introducing at least 1,000 megawatts, ratepayers could potentially enjoy net savings of about $2 billion over the next decade. So in addition to being a technological supportive option, we also believe that energy storage can be a really good support in terms of helping the affordability of energy going forward. So one of the terms that we often hear and one of the things that helps with this affordability is value stacking. Value stacking refers to the ability of some energy storage assets to provide multiple services in a single piece of infrastructure, which means basically that that single piece of infrastructure can do more than one thing for the grid and the electricity that it is connected to. So it's able to maybe provide backup support when power goes out on the grid, or also provide general services to the grid at other times. This is just a bit of an overview to give you a highlight of the planned projects and existing projects in Canada. As you can see from the map, they are Canada-wide from Nova Scotia all the way over to the West Coast. There are lots that I am confident are not included in our map, but there are also just a variety of projects here on our map to give you a sense of the kind of types of projects and where those projects are across the country. Another common question that we often get related to energy storage is whether it's the same as carbon capture utilization and storage, or CCUS. And they're not the same. Energy storage stores electricity to be used later, and CCUS is a categorization of a group of technology that captures, compresses, and transports CO2, often preventing it from emitting generation resources to use in production of other items like concrete or synthetic fuels. So while energy storage is putting electricity aside to be used for later, CCUS is capturing CO2 and preventing it from being emitted to use in the production of a different project at a later time. One of the other common questions that we receive a lot is whether energy storage is clean. The grid is clean, then the energy storage is clean, because whatever resource the energy storage is taking the electricity from is what determines whether it's clean or not. So if you have a coal plant that is producing energy and you store that, then the energy storage isn't so clean. But here in Canada, we have a pretty clean grid. And so when you're drawing that electricity from a clean resource, energy storage is a very clean resource to add to our grid. And the last question that we get quite a lot is, can energy storage work with any kind of fuel source? And it absolutely can. In terms of energy storage technology, it can store any electricity generated by any resource and then store it for later based on whatever kind of technology that energy storage infrastructure is. So what are some of the opportunities and challenges for energy storage? Some of the opportunities that we're seeing in Canada as well as in the United States right now are that it is a new tool that is available to utilities and customers. While there are certainly lots of existing projects and more projects in waiting and in early implementation stages across Canada and the United States, it is a fairly new technology that can be added to our grid. And so it gives utilities and customers the ability to use their energy and support the grid in different ways. The net zero push that we're seeing in Canada and across the world also accelerates our market growth. There's a lot of opportunities for energy storage to plug in to fill in some of the gaps that will be created as the demand for electricity increases across the country. And this provides a lot of unique market opportunities. One of the best opportunities related to energy storage is that it's a really flexible asset. It's compatible with all generation resources, so it can work to support either intermittent renewable resources as they come online, or help to optimize existing resources that are already part of the established grid. And as we talked about, some of those different assets through value stacking can be used to do more than one thing on the grid, so they're able to provide multiple sources of value for our grid. Some of the challenges, however, that we're seeing is that as the grid in Canada changes, there's an overhaul of traditional planning and regulations. And some of that being in flux makes it really difficult to get some of our newer non-wire alternatives, such as energy storage, approved and incorporated into the grid. It's just the fact that things are changing a little bit. Energy storage is kind of a new resource, and so it's a bit harder to get it onto the grid when there's not already established paths for that to happen. The other challenge related to energy storage is that there's a lot of new technology. Energy storage is not the only new technology that's out there, and there are a lot of different types of energy storage even within that particular sector. So markets are a little bit difficult to predict when there's all kinds of new technologies, along with all of the different types of energy storage technologies that are coming onto the grid. And part of this means that the initial markets for energy storage are going to be quite small. They're just starting to fill in some of the gaps as these changes are taking place and as the regulations enable energy storage to plug into the grid. And there's also the fact that as they're doing that, they're in competition with traditional wire resources because they've already been there, they've been established, we know how to do those processes and regulations are already in place. So bringing in new technologies like energy storage are going to be more difficult because it's something different and you have to do different things to get it implemented, and people are just not quite used to it. It's not as reflexive as doing wired resources. The other challenge related to energy storage, particularly depending on the type of energy storage that you're using, is related to supply chain issues, which, as I know many of us have experienced, have been exacerbated in all kinds of different industries throughout COVID. So this is just some of the recent energy storage policy that we've been working on and watching across Canada. One pretty recent piece was the Clean Energy Regulation Framework that came out from the federal government. Another thing that we've been watching specific to Alberta is the bulk and regional tariff with the AUC and Bill 2022, which came out this spring. In Ontario, we're seeing a lot of things happening in terms of the RFP that's been put out. There's a lot of energy storage projects that are in line for consideration for the RFP. In Nova Scotia, we're seeing some of their IRP implementations where they are looking to get some additional storage on the grid as well. And they are transitioning and have set some pretty rigorous net zero goals and are looking to non-wire alternatives to complement some of the renewable resources that they have to make that possible. And more recently in Nova Scotia, there was an energy storage announcement from the federal government that will be providing Nova Scotia some funds to develop more wind fields, as well as 4 battery sites across the province. So there's a lot happening in energy storage in Canada right now. As I said, you can also join us if you want to learn more at our conference this year. It'll be taking place in person in Toronto, October 11th and 12th. This will be our first in-person conference since 2019. As many people, we went virtual for the last 2 years for COVID, but we've seen a huge growth in our participation at our conference. And we are really excited to be able to bring that in person to folks. And we'll be talking more in depth from a lot of the experts in our membership that will be able to go into some of the topics that I've only touched on in this overview in far more depth and detail, which we'll also be able to do today in some of our Q&A sessions. And with that, I would like to pass things over to my colleague from Skyfire.
Thanks, Leon. I will share my screen. There we go. Everybody see the title page?
Looking good.
All right. So I'm Dave Kelly, CEO, founder, and employee owner at Skyfire Energy. Skyfire is an employee-owned solar EPC based in Calgary, Edmonton, West Kelowna, and Regina. So we've been doing solar for the last 21 years. I installed the first grid tie system on my home in 2001. It was a very, very small 600 watt system at about $30 a watt. So very expensive, very small, but it was a start. So a little bit about how solar works. I just want to touch on that. Photovoltaic modules generate DC electricity, gets converted into AC, and we're talking mainly on the grid tie side. We'll talk a little bit about storage as well. But most of our systems are grid tied. So once we do the conversion to AC, we have a connection to the grid, which is generally the breaker in your breaker panel. So we were able to backfeed a typical residential or commercial electrical distribution panel. That will then either deliver to the loads in your home, charge your electric car, or if the solar system is producing more energy than you need, we would backfeed that to the grid. So Alberta has a microgeneration act, which allows us to do that. And the bidirectional meter will measure the energy going into the building if we're purchasing energy, if we need more than the solar can produce. And it will also measure the energy going out. So if we're producing more than the home needs, we would feed that back into the grid, and it would get delivered to our neighbors and into the grid in general in Alberta. So this is what a typical system on a flat roof would look like. And this is what we would see for the energy production. So obviously, sun's coming up in the morning. We see the yellow line here is solar production. And in the middle graph, the top of this graph is kind of flat. And the reason for that is we've built about a 5.4 kilowatt solar system here with a 4 kilowatt inverter. So we've topped out at 4 kilowatts that the system is able to export. And anytime the yellow line or the orangish colored line is above the blue, we're exporting. Anytime the blue is above, we would be importing energy from the grid. So a typical daytime, good day, June 15th. This is an older graph, but system still operating. And that export is roughly, a good chunk. You can see the area under the curve is the export. So we've produced twice as much energy as the home used in a day. You can see some things cycling on and off overnight. This house actually has an electric hot water tank. That's likely what's cycling on here. And then, morning, late morning, and evening time activities using energy. And obviously, we don't have any production during the dark. So we're here to talk a little bit about electric vehicles, and apologize for kind of jumping back and forth, but I was hoping that Dennis would be here, we would have the EV talk beforehand. So I want to talk about PV to EV versus wells to wheels. And the easiest way to think about it is if I take $100 worth of energy, whether that be $100 worth of gasoline, so we're going to use a Lexus LS 500 and a Tesla Model S. Both vehicles roughly cost the same. I think the Lexus LS all-wheel drive hybrid is in the range of $134,000. A Tesla Model S is $136,000. So comparable vehicles. Gone on the luxury end just because that's kind of where EVs are today, other than the Chevy Bolt and the Leafs. And I happen to own a Model S, an older one, but it's a good example. So if I take $100 worth of gasoline, unfortunately the Lexus needs premium, so we're going to use $1.62 a liter for that. It's going to go roughly 700 to 800 kilometers on that $100 worth of fuel. The Tesla is going to go about 2,600 kilometers on grid electricity at about 20 cents a kilowatt hour. Looking at today's regulated rate option, we're at about 16 cents plus another 4 or 5 cents for transmission distribution. So that's kind of where you're at if you're on the RRO in Alberta. If we were to use a good solar system, so a nice south-facing roof, reasonably sized system that's reasonably easy to install, what we look at is a levelized cost of energy from the solar. So the levelized cost, we take the cost of the solar system, any financing costs, ongoing operations and maintenance costs, and we divide that by the energy production over 25 years. Solar modules come with a 25-year warranty, and so it seems like a reasonable number to use. I've seen residential systems lower than this, but this is sort of typical for a decent solar roof at 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That's energy delivered to your home. So if you're able to charge your electric vehicle with solar energy, you're going to be over 6,000 kilometers with $100 worth of electricity at a levelized cost of energy of 7.5 cents. So, people talk about, the electric vehicle is much more efficient. It's less emitting. It's also far, far cheaper to drive. So that's a really neat selling feature. And again, people say solar or electric vehicles are expensive. Well, so is the Lexus LS400. I just got a quote this week on a Chevy Bolt EUV, and pretty reasonable cost. It's $42,000 for that vehicle. So considerably cheaper than these things, and comparable to a lot of other gasoline-powered vehicles. So we're reaching that point now where you can make the choice to choose electric versus a gasoline vehicle at reasonable prices. So how do we calculate the solar required to charge the electric vehicle? We can look at, say, a 15,000 kilometers per year. If we're using 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, fairly typical on an EV. We would need 2.7 megawatt hours or 2775 kilowatt hours a year to charge that vehicle, to deliver the energy into the battery, to drive 15,000 kilometers. A good system, middle of Alberta somewhere, say between Calgary and Red Deer and Edmonton, even 1,200 kilowatt hours per kilowatt per year from a solar system. So a south-facing roof with a kilowatt of solar modules will deliver 1,200 kilowatt hours per kilowatt installed per year. So doing the math there, we get a lot of math on the page, I apologize. 2.31 kilowatt solar array, approximate cost, again, depending on the roof, how difficult it is to install, $8,500 less the federal rebate. So considerably cheaper, considerably cheaper than the fuel, and simple payback, displacing gasoline, is 3 years. Very, very cheap way to drive. We see a lot of challenges with an EV addition to a home, to existing electrical services. I have a 100 amp service in my house. I'm limited to a 30 amp breaker on my solar. The limits are based on the main breaker size, your home size. So there's a calculation based on the square footage of the home, and then the number of large electrical loads in the house. So we do a calculation. It's required here in the city of Calgary in order to size the breaker and size the EV charger. And we would do that math for you and install the solar. There is a way to go a little bit larger than you would normally, and that was with current measuring and limiting hardware. So if we look at the current limiter, the little gray box in the photograph on the left-hand side at the top, what that's doing is measuring the current coming into the home. And when the current coming in is reaching 80% of the rated capacity of the panel, and it's programmed for a 100 amp panel or 200 amp panel, we would disconnect the EV charger. So you're not overloading the circuitry in your home, but still allows you to charge at a higher capacity. Obviously, a 200 amp panel has more capacity than a 100 amp panel. And so a lot of the new homes, home builders are installing the 200 amp panels, more so in Calgary than Edmonton. I know some of the infrastructure in Edmonton is challenged to start putting in 200 amp panels in all new installations, but Calgary is moved in that direction, anticipating the EV, anticipating perhaps heat pumps for air conditioning. And obviously we're seeing warmer and warmer summers here. So we're seeing more of the heat pumps being installed and more people converting to EVs. So there's a few ways to manage that. We're looking at a couple of net zero energy homes. Some of them have moved to 100 amp service or to 200 amp service from 100 amp service, and use similar technology to this, looking at that current limiting capacity to manage loads in the home and still maintain the 100 amp service. There's lots of different ways to look at it. There's some now smart electrical panels that will manage loads on a breaker by breaker level in the electrical panel. So we're seeing more and more smart technology happening to allow for bigger electrical loads in homes. So getting even better, there's a lot of talk about electric bicycles. So a throttle assist electric bike. So you can buy them, doesn't require you to pedal. It uses about 0.025 kilowatt hours per kilometer. Pedal assist, so you're pedaling, you have to pedal for the bike to assist you, 0.015 kilowatt hours per kilometer. And a Tesla Model S, again, are 0.185 or 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometer. And so remember, we were a little over 7,000 kilometers with the Tesla, 6,000, I think 6,000 or 7,000 kilometers. In the previous graph, an e-bike full throttle only, 53,000 kilometers on our $100 worth of energy. And an e-bike with pedal assist is 88,000 kilometers on $100 worth of electricity. So very, very efficient, and certainly a means of reducing your costs on transport. And if you can make an electric bike work, displacing a car, lots of cargo bikes available. They'd be slightly less than this because they are a heavier vehicle. But certainly a much better solution than an electric car for using the least amount of energy to get around. So a little bit about residential scale storage. We don't see a lot of residential storage happening today. Alberta does not have time of use pricing for residential accounts. So we're not seeing people sort of charging up during low power times and when solar is available, and then exporting that energy during high cost times. We're seeing that in jurisdictions like California, Hawaii, where they're mandating storage to go along with solar. They've got so much storage on the grid that they have a challenge at the end of the day when the sun goes down. We've still got people working, so office and factory loads are high. People are starting to cook dinner. So the power demand spikes and the production drops with the solar at sunset. And so they're looking for ways to use some of that midday solar production and being able to export it at that end of day, very steep ramp of demand. So in Alberta, primary Alberta solar storage, customers look for backup power, and they often already own an EV, quite often a Tesla. If we're installing a Tesla Powerwall, there's lots of options. There is Tesla, there's Enphase, there's Generac, Solar Edge, Iguana, manufactured here in Alberta, is offering a residential scale inverter with storage as well. So there's lots of options. Again, it's primarily in a backup situation and possibility to store some of your solar for later use in the home. There have been some code changes that have impacted how we can install solar in a home. February 2022, Alberta adopted the latest version of the Canadian Electrical Code. It limits storage to less than 20 kilowatt hours in a garage, and no battery storage is allowed inside the dwelling unit, which is the term used in the Electrical Code. So we can no longer put a Tesla Powerwall or any battery storage inside a house. It has to be installed in a garage. And with the Tesla Powerwall being about a 13.5 kilowatt hour of storage, we can install one. This was a prior to code change install in the photograph above. So you can see there's two Tesla Powerwalls there. Larger storage is possible, but it must be in a detached building, and most batteries will require heated space. So you would have to have a heating system in that isolated space away from the dwelling unit. So there are some challenges. We're hoping to have solar or storage again allowed in the next code change. There was some misunderstandings in the code committee, I believe, and some challenges there. We tried to have it resolved prior to publishing of the code, but that didn't happen. A little bit about storage versus net billing. So people talk about wanting to store their solar energy. So to do that, you've got a very high upfront cost for the equipment. The round trip efficiency is not 100%. Obviously limited capacity under the new code rules. Space is required in the garage. It does provide backup power. With a typical grid tie system that's net billed, which is our microgeneration policy here in Alberta, obviously there's no cost to add storage because you haven't done that. And it's close to 100% round trip energy efficiency. So I export that energy out to the grid, somebody else uses it. whether it be my neighbor, somebody across the street would use that energy, and virtually no loss going from my house to their house. The challenge for homeowners is net billing is not 100% round trip on the price. We are paying for retail price of energy. We're paying transmission is 100% variable. Distribution is a portion variable and a portion daily charge. And then in the major cities, some of the smaller communities have a local access fee, which is the municipal or city tax basically on your electric bill. They're paying for the right of way of the power lines running through the city. So when we export energy, we get credit for the retail price. These are systems, residential scale systems. If we're buying energy, we're paying all four of those charges: retail, transmission, distribution, local access fee. So we don't have a one-to-one net metering type policy here in Alberta. BC has a net metering policy. Saskatchewan has a net billing policy. The net billing obviously requires no space in the home, but it doesn't provide backup. So it's kind of the differences between having the storage and using net billing as storing credits on your electric bill versus storing the energy at home. So electrifying transport with the existing infrastructure. So there's going to be some challenges. That service size is certainly one of them. And when we see more heat pumps, we're going to have more demands on the grid. So there's lots of opportunities here. And I haven't done any sort of modeling of this to show what an example might be, but local and community microgrid. We have done some net zero energy multi-unit residential buildings where we can't go net zero in every building because the transformers and local distribution infrastructure can't handle the export if all the homes were exporting. So we may see local or microgrid where we have storage, we have ability to store the energy locally rather than export it, and export it slowly over time rather than overloading the system. So there's lots of interesting opportunities. Smart charging. A typical residential transformer in the Calgary area or Edmonton area is designed for 3 kilowatts per home. So if we have a 6 kilowatt or larger EV charger in every home, we are going to have some challenges matching up, and we're going to have some awfully warm transformers. So we may have to have smart charging where the smart meter will talk to the smart chargers and cycle that charging capacity through the neighborhood over the evening and late night hours. Smart metering will contribute to that. I've seen in Ottawa where the smart meters are talking to the smart thermostat. So at a very high peak, the local utility is able to shed load by turning off somebody's air conditioner for 15 or 20 minutes, and they'll cycle that through the neighborhood. So that would be like smart load shedding and allowing people to still have air conditioning. You're not going to miss 20 minutes of air conditioning in a home. It's got a big thermal flywheel, so you would still stay cool. The same can be done with an electric hot water tank. So there's potential there for entrepreneurs to develop these technologies, working with local wire owners to use smart technology rather than having to upgrade the entire grid to satisfy very infrequent peak loads that do occur. So what does it look like? We're seeing more and more communities that look like this, where we've got solar on nearly every rooftop. Seeing that happen in Edmonton, seeing that happen in Calgary. Pretty exciting to see. My house was the second grid tie system in the city of Calgary and third or fourth in the province. So it was pretty rare to see solar back then. Today, we see entire communities with solar scattered throughout, and we see EV charging capacity growing in Alberta and across Canada. I was recently in Newfoundland and Labrador, seeing EV chargers all the way across the Trans-Labrador Highway, all across Newfoundland, and certainly driving back and forth into BC, we see quite a bit of charging infrastructure there. And we're slowly converting our fleet. This was our first electric vehicle at Skyfire, and I've just recently purchased a Ford e-Transit. So we'll be converting our work fleet over to EVs as fast as we can. And we think the operating costs are going to be much, much lower than running gasoline and diesel vehicles. So pretty excited to have that happen. And we'll pass it on to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to ask you to turn off that screen share. Oh, you're ahead of me. That's great. And Louise and Leon, if you wouldn't mind joining David and me with your cameras on now for the Q&A. We'll have the four of us here. Wonderful. So just a reminder to those who may have joined us late, Louise has kindly joined us from Electric Mobility Canada to answer questions specifically about EVs today. But of course, David also is familiar with the EV territory, so we'll have a couple resources there for that. So that's great. Lots of questions in the Q&A, and I just want to encourage all of our attendees to feel free to upvote questions that they want to prioritize. Add some more of your own. I'm going to try and take those that are most upvoted as much as possible, but of course always have to throw in a few of my own because I love learning from our presenters as much as the rest of you. So let's kick things off here with a question from Rob. He asks, so batteries are typically front and center when we think of energy storage. Do we think batteries will be the dominant form of energy storage deployed in the coming decades, or will other technologies such as pumped hydro, hydrogen, power to gas, or liquid compressed air make up a meaningful part of the mix of energy storage on the grid? I'm going to pass that one over to you, Leon. What are your thoughts on the mix in the future?
So in terms of we're going to continue battery pretty dominant. We
Sorry,
have
Leon.
the technology. Oh,
your audio cut out there, but I think it was starting to catch on at the very end. If you wouldn't mind repeating that.
not at all. So I think in the short term, we're going to continue to see a lot of emphasis on batteries. We have the technology and we have the companies and the established connections and process for those. But I think over the course of the longer term in terms of storage resources, we are going to see a lot more of the hydrogen storage, a lot more of the compressed air and the flywheel mechanical storage and all of those other resources come onto the grid as we start to kind of expand what storage looks like and expand the ways we think of it in terms of plugging into the grid.
Thank you. I imagine all the investors on the line are frantically writing down whatever you guys say on this answer. We always get a few investors in every session. How about you, David? Louise, anything to add on that, or shall we jump to the next question?
Do we have to have a forward-looking projection?
Need your crystal ball. Yeah. Yeah. Can you just rub your crystal ball there?
That's right.
Yeah. David, do you want to chime in? And then I see Louise, you there as well. Great.
Go ahead, Louise.
These are very exciting items. I learned some stuff with you guys. Thank you so much. But I just see that link between electrification of transportation and these renewables, especially for solar. You said it's nice to see solars on top of every house, but I'd like to also see a charger at every house. And these batteries in these cars, and there will soon be, there's already hundreds of thousands of them, and then there'll be millions. And these are storage. It's storage. It's mobile storage, and it could be used to relieve pressure on peak demand. The technology might not quite yet be there, but we've got the Lightning that seems to have that capacity integrated into it, the Ford F-150 Lightning. So I think that batteries, yes, will play a big role, but as Leon said, we'll continue to have the need for other types of storage. And don't forget the second life of these car batteries. Once they've degraded to a point where they're not as interesting in the car, they're still not done. They can still be used for storage. I have a Spark EV that's degrading nicely, but once it's done, I'm not going to sell the car. I'm just going to keep that battery and set it up in my home for storage.
I just want to quote you on that. It's degrading nicely. I feel like that's just the way of this sector, and it's beautiful. So I feel like Rob is going to need to add EVs to his list of the ways we imagine storage going forward. Absolutely. David, you did such a nice presentation, but I don't know if you actually mentioned that Skyfire provides all three.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna
we don't sell EVs, but we do sell EV chargers.
No, the chargers. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna put that plug in there because there was a reason we hit you up as a sponsor, and that is because you do the triple threat, as
right.
we call it. I've got a lot of dancers and musical theater folks in my staff contingent, so we always have to refer to the triple threat when thinking about all these different technologies combined. Okay, great. I see there's an upvoted question from Stephen here, and I think he was intending this for the audience, but I actually happen to know the approximate number in Alberta. So he says, how many people here have installed solar on their homes? I can't speak to the participants in the room today, but I know that last I checked in July, there were over 8,300 installations on homes and businesses in Alberta. So and we're seeing that number go up at hundreds every month. So it's probably over 8,500 by now. I will say, Stephen, we're going to be shifting to the Zoom meeting room after this webinar format, and we could ask that question and get everyone to raise their hands there, but it's a little hard to have a big group answer on a webinar. So I'll just mark that one for now, and we'll come back to it. Graham is wondering, he says, we recently installed solar on our home and have put a deposit on an EV with a delivery hopefully in 2023. We're all going to keep our fingers crossed for you, Graham. I know that the wait can be very long. When we installed panels, we were limited to 100% of electricity generation. I think he means that they have currently online. But with the EV coming, what would you suggest for additional solar panels to account for the addition of the EV? I think you actually had a slide on that, David. And I think if I recall, I think you said it was about 2 to 3,000.
Yeah, watts.
2.3 watts and about 2 to 3,000 kilowatts. Yeah, sorry, and $2,000 to $3,000 right now or so. And actually, it was really quite heartening to see all of that because we're in the same boat here in my home, trying to upscale our solar array to match our EVs. So
yeah, the cost was a little more than 2,000 or 3,000. I can't remember what the number we had up, but
okay, sorry, I shouldn't mislead people.
It was $8,000 or $9,000 less the rebate.
Less the rebate. That's where I was getting the number from. I'm always thinking rebates here, but the downside is if you use the rebate for your initial home install, I'm pretty sure you can't then apply it to your second install, which is too bad. I'll try and lobby on that. All right. Anything to add on that before we move on, or do you feel like you covered it there?
No, I think we covered it.
Great.
And it really depends on the mileage too. How many, if you're driving 100,000 kilometers a year, you're going to need a larger solar system.
Right. And the installer will ask you that, right? They're gonna ask what's your average drive, commute, all that jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a home office worker like me, you're probably not going to be allowed as big an installation. Of course, we are working on our microgen lobby to change all that, but in the meantime, the regulation stands. So Brent is curious about the transmission infrastructure in Alberta. Are we progressing towards the smart network that we're all dreaming of? Thinking about specifically V2G. No idea. I should know what that is, but I'm going to have to ask one of you.
Vehicle to grid.
Okay, thank you. I love it. I'm like, okay, I need to learn a new acronym every day. Based on the PG&E, this is like a quiz here. Who knows PG&E?
Pacific Gas and Electric.
Nice. Okay.
California.
You're like my translator now. I'm going to have to pay you for this. And Tesla Pilot in California. Yeah. And the Ford EF-150. Of course, we know that one because what Albertan hasn't heard about the Lightning? I saw we have to get some chrome testicles for all those Lightnings. I don't know. I've got the two Eastern Canadians here who have no idea what these truck nuts are. But anyways, we're going to have to think of the electric version of truck nuts for these new Lightnings. Anyway, so I'm digressing from the question, but really the question was about transmission infrastructure in Alberta and how are we heading towards a smart network? Who wants to take we're also on the crystal ball section again. I feel
one of the advantages of distributed generation. So, solar is really, really scalable. We can do 2 kilowatts on a house. We can do, a 500 megawatt solar farm. With all of the distributed generation, we're building that generation where it's used. So in the cities, in the large, urban populations where we're doing rooftop solar, it doesn't really impact the transmission system significantly. Once we start building larger scale, solar farms out in rural areas, then there are some challenges, particularly right now in southern Alberta, where we don't have a ton of transmission capacity, where you've got to do some studies to make sure there is capacity that you can connect your solar farm and you're not going to be curtailed because there's no capacity to export that to where the load is.
Yeah, I did hear about that recently, David. There was a ComGen initiative in southern Alberta, and Fortis had to say it's a no-go because they can't accommodate. But I really liked what I was hearing you say about, hey, let's get this energy storage going at the same time. I know it's an added cost, but that microgrid solution should ideally enable ComGen to come online even in some of the rural areas that are less able to handle the extra energy.
I'd like to add on that. I find that solar is, what solar has done in the past decades, because it's been a long run, developing how we get that energy into the house or into the grid, has already prepared the way for vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. There are many obstacles that have been taken care of through these solar developments. So it'll be interesting to see how these same solutions that have been developed in the solar energy sector will be used to integrate vehicles that can do bidirectional, sending back energy to the home, to the building, or to the grid. So this is a short-term development that I think we start seeing more and more of in the electric vehicle, and not just the smaller vehicles. We've got those larger, those big trucks and buses coming on. They have big batteries, and they have, again, a very big capacity of storing and pushing it back to the grid when it needs it.
Yeah, there's some great potential.
Yeah, the thought behind the vehicle to grid, I first heard about this at a conference 20 years ago in the States. And so people have been talking about it for a very long time. And so if I've got an electric vehicle, it's parked in my garage, I'm home for dinner, we're seeing an energy peak happening or a demand peak happening. I can, theoretically could say to the local utility, I'm going to sell you 10% of my battery. At that peak, I'm going to go charge it up again at 3 a.m. when there's not a big demand. So that's the theory and the concept behind vehicle to grid is you would decide that, yes, I'm going to allow my vehicle battery to be depleted by 10% at dinner time, and I'm going to charge it back up in the morning, probably at a lower rate. And obviously it has to make sense economically for you as well.
Yeah. It's amazing the possibilities that are out there and that we're already seeing other jurisdictions adopt that, at one time sounded very fanciful and and impossible to imagine. Now
the technology exists, so
we're living.
Yeah,
we're living there already. So that's great. Garth is wondering, long term, we will need to dispose of the batteries that we are using for storage and the EV batteries. Are there facilities that can recycle all these, or are we creating waste that no longer makes this green energy? And actually, I have a webinar on that. So Garth, I get to refer you to our Solar Alberta YouTube channel. We have a webinar from our 2021 solar show where Li-Cycle battery, they presented along with some solar recycling folks. They presented about battery recycling, and they've been doing that for at least 2 years now and longer. Do our panelists want to add anything to that disposal question? Because of course, this is, we all want to be good stewards of the environment.
Yeah. It's something that's being very closely looked at by the industry and also by regulators too. And yes, there are very precious minerals and elements in these batteries. They're not just these little batteries that we kind of throw out or recycle depending on how we feel. These are huge, and there's sort of a urban mining that will be done and that is already commenced. As you said, Li-Cycle here in Quebec, we've got lithium, and there are other projects in Canada that we know of. So it's ramping up as the product becomes available, because they'll need that input to have a viable industry. So the urban mining has commenced and will be developed for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great to hear, and I wish we could get an update on that at our coming solar show. But I have scheduled, just so you all know, an update from the Alberta Recycling Management Authority about their solar PV recycling and reuse program, and maybe that's a good time to hit them up to talk EV batteries as well. So although I know there's already a market for that in Canada, so they may not need to go there if the market's going there.
There is a company out of Vancouver, I believe, that's recycling vehicle batteries into stationary storage. So
oh, wow.
It's happening.
I think I heard about that. That's great. Yeah, really neat. Really neat. So Lee Lingtam is asking, which energy storage in cars is better under the environment of sub-zero? So battery or hydrogen. Let's talk northern Canada here. Any recommendations as you head north?
I know that EV batteries generally don't mind the cold. They might not be as efficient in either, pulling in energy or pushing them out when I'm thinking about fast charging. But EV batteries, the lithium batteries don't mind the cold. They don't like the heat very much, but cold will not affect them, or especially will not affect their lifespan or their capacity. Don't know enough about how much energy is being put into a battery on a solar array. So I don't know if that would be limited in any way.
Well, we know that solar PV likes the cold, so
yes, yeah.
So we're very compatible there. We all like the cold. How about the other energy storage, Leon? Do the other energy storage techniques like the cold as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a case of which technology you're talking about, but generally speaking, you can mobilize pretty much any energy storage technology you like. As Louise said, it's more in terms of the efficiency of the deployment versus its ability to actually function.
Thank you.
Now, one of the challenges with the electric vehicles is, with an internal combustion engine, we're taking waste heat to heat the car, keep you warm while you're driving. We don't have the waste heat because the engine's so efficient. So we've got to create heat either through a resistance heater, or a lot of the new vehicles, most of the Teslas now, and I believe the Ioniq 5 have a heat pump. So they're using a little bit of energy to heat, as well as pulling energy from the air, heat from the air, amplifying it effectively. And I saw a great graphic on Twitter yesterday. Sarah Hastings Simons published. There was an artist from, I think she's from New York. She's like, explain heat pump to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And so there was this little gnome that was taking heat from outside and bringing it into your house. And then he was sipping on some electricity to keep him operating. So I thought that was a great graphic as to how does a heat pump work.
Oh, the gnome. I saw that too this morning, David, and I couldn't resist sharing it. I thought the little gnome heat pump. And for those of you who want slightly higher than the 5-year-old version, that's available if you follow David, Sarah, or me on Twitter. We actually have a heat pump session we're planning for the solar show, February 5th, 6th to 10th. And we're going to have a professor from NATE coming, because I can't tell you how many calls I'm getting about heat pumps lately. So I just want everyone to come to the solar show. I say heating and cooling pumps, because right now people are wanting them to replace air conditioners, or in lieu of.
Yeah, and there's two kinds of heat pumps. There's ground source, which uses a loop through the ground, and there's air source, which just looks like an air conditioner.
Yeah. We have our first ground source member at Solar Alberta now, David. So we're really diversifying. Yeah. So I need more air source guys, though, and gals. Right. Maybe the gals. Maybe
we're doing some work. We're doing some work with some net zero energy retrofits on homes.
Nice.
And so a group of them are looking at the air source as an option. And I just visited last week and did an interview for TELUS Optic TV, looking at the solar aspect of a ground source heat pump.
Nice.
And there was reasons for both. So, one technology is not better than the other. It's just what fits better for your situation.
I heard the geology matters a lot. Apparently Canmore's got some kind of like hot geology for
cool.
for geothermal. They were telling me all about it, so that's pretty neat. So
Well,
Brent,
there's the Banff Hot Springs. That's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it
not
has
too
something
far away.
something to do with that, actually. I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm going to have the town of Canmore here to tell me about their geothermal soon.
Cool.
So Brent is wondering, he's curious about the transmission infrastructure. Oh, we did answer that one,
Yeah, we
actually,
did.
I think.
I think so.
I'll just click that one done. Chris here, why is Alberta resistant to net metering? You know, because you mentioned BC has net metering. A
Yep.
lot of folks are feeling like we could move further on community generation if we had it. So why are they resistant to net metering on net billing and not implementing time of day pricing to manage grid peaks? Yeah, why isn't there more movement on this?
I actually just saw a comment from somebody at ATCO saying they have a daytime, or sorry, peak or time of use pricing at the residential level. So it sounds like that's coming. The logic is you've got to pay for the transmission, you've got to pay for the distribution no matter what. I get it, but having that energy at the local level where the loads are has a higher value than the price of the energy. So it certainly is a little bit unfair to local generators to be net billed versus net metered, but there is obviously a cost difference, and I don't know. I would like to see net metering as a better solution. Yeah.
Well, and I think there are some folks trying to research this very question, like why isn't this happening? Part of it is a logistics issue, I think, and part of it is a policy and advocacy issue. So
my first system I installed was net metered. Had an analog meter, and you could see the wheel spin forwards when you were buying energy, and it would spin backwards when you were exporting. It was really cool.
Wow.
And then our microgen policy came in, and I got a digital meter that only went.
I participated last year in a program here in Quebec where for peak hours, and it was voluntary, and I took the extreme version, you know, the one that was more of a game. But on peak hours, energy that I used would cost me 50 whopping cents per kilowatt hour. Yeah, so I can tell you, we did not use very much energy, and those cars were not plugged. So it's very motivating, but in return, we got a lower price for the rest of the day, you know? So there are things to do, and maybe the utilities in Alberta could start by doing just pilot projects like that on a voluntary basis, and just see how it goes. We had a lot of fun last winter, and we're looking forward to doing it again this winter.
Well, that's good to hear that you've got some of that initiative happening across the country, and if ATCO's starting to move on that, I'm curious to learn more about that as well, because I hadn't heard that. So yeah, there's probably about 80% of our attendees right now are glossing over, because I tell you, my first week on the job, I heard about this net metering versus net billing fiasco, and 2 years in, I still don't exactly understand the difference. But I think it's because I haven't lived
different prices.
it.
Yeah,
I haven't
different
lived
prices.
it. Yeah, and so if you've lived it, you know it. And I do understand that it could enable a lot of things that are not currently happening, both in terms of grid reliability, but also in terms of getting renters and others into the solar mix a lot sooner, probably through community generation. So looks like Ashita is asking, what is the link between these three industries contributing towards circular economy? I think we did touch a little bit on the recycling aspect. Maybe I'll let you folks add to that. But I know the first time we started this conversation, I was surprised to learn that solar in particular is very different from other electronics, in that it's not actually planned to be obsolete within 5 years like every other device I have. They actually plan for it to be around and warranted for 25 years, and they can last forever.
Longer,
And so that was shocking for me. But do you folks want to add anything more to the circular economy question?
I guess the only time we've had to recycle solar modules is when we've broken them. No, they just keep working.
Yeah, it will be probably an issue when our solar farms.
In 30 years, obviously, we're going to need some sort of recycling. There already exists some recycling facilities in the U.S. There is a recycling facility being developed here in Alberta. There's not a huge demand. Again, we haven't had large rollouts of solar 30 years ago. So there's not a big demand to recycle solar modules today.
Well, and there's that whole secondary market in the US too, kind of like a Craigslist system there that I don't doubt will expand here. Do they have that for EV batteries or energy storage? Are people buying those secondhand, or I mean, I know Louise, you mentioned they're still useful.
Yeah. So we've seen a lot of EV batteries get to recycled into EV retrofits. Yeah. As well as, this company out of Vancouver doing EV battery into stationary battery for storage in buildings.
Yeah,
I know people that buy these batteries for retrofits and for storage and different systems. You got to be quick to get your hands on them.
That's right.
North American market. So yeah, they're very valuable, and sometimes they just buy the, accidented cars that are just not reusable, and they just buy it for the battery.
That's right.
For the battery. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's beyond 1:15 and I promised everyone the Zoom meeting room, and I know I see some questions that would actually be really good to answer in the Zoom meeting room. So there's two things that are going to happen now. First, we're going to have a quick poll just to see whether you folks learned anything today and found this presentation helpful. So we're just going to pop that poll up on the screen now, and you can take a minute to answer. It's always easier to get feedback while you're still with us than after, but please fill out your surveys too. And then we're going to post a Zoom meeting link in the chat. And what we're going to do is I invite you all to click on that link and then join us in the Zoom meeting room, because I want you to meet our panelists. I'm still going to moderate. I'll still be here. So don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging, but just want the opportunity to see a few of your faces and have some dialogue. And anyone whose question did not get answered in the Q&A, please come over to the meeting room and ask it there. Happy to have a little more familiar and comfortable dialogue there with you all. So thank you for coming to the formal webinar. Thank you to Skyfire for sponsoring, to Louise, Leon, and David for presenting and participating today.